Okay, so let's tie everything back up to the present. So the Great Depression is basically where the Federal Reserve learned its lesson about monetary policy. That it set the precedent for how monetary policy should be done, going forward. Essentially, after the Federal Reserve took a bigger role in trying to affect monetary policy, which essentially happened after the 1970s. Um, they looked to the Great Depression as what not to do. So it was hugely influential because it showed them, okay, this is what we shouldn't do, and therefore influenced everything they did, essentially from 1980 up until the present. And the principle is that when the economy is in a downturn, you should expand the money supply. In fact, the person in charge of the Fed during the financial crisis, during the closest thing we've had to a Great Depression, was Ben Bernanke, and he was an expert on the Great Depression. So it's like imagine if there's like an asteroid coming towards the Earth, and there's a guy who spent his life studying how to destroy the asteroid, and then the asteroid's coming, and the government's like, "Hey, you're up, man. You studied it. Here you go." So that's Ben Bernanke. He spends his whole life studying the Great Depression, happens to be chairman of the Fed when the next Great Depression hits, and they're like, "Hey, you're up. You say you know how to solve this problem. Go ahead." And so basically, that's what he did. He essentially expanded the money supply. Here's the money supply. The red line is the money supply. In response to the 2008 crisis, the blue line is the Great Depression. So here's where they contract the money supply in the Great Depression. Bernanke just expanded it, cut the interest rate, which is expanding the money supply. It's the same thing. And here you have the economy going off a cliff like it did. So the red line again is the recent crisis. I guess not recent, and it feels recent to me, but not recent to you guys. To the 2008 crisis. So here's the economy going off a cliff. Blue line is where it went off a cliff in the Great Depression. You could see it corrects rather rapidly. And so they essentially learned their lesson and got the economy not all the way back to trend, but certainly the economy recovered. Now, again, this is not like a laboratory, so it's not like we know for sure the Fed's policies are what caused the recovery. But it's just suggestive evidence that the lessons learned from the Great Depression were implemented in 2008, and we did not have as deep of a downturn as we did during the Great Depression. All right, that's it for the monetary policy lecture. Adios.